Hi, I'm Gunbreak1 from Midgardia RPG's cool crowdfunding show. Today we get into some very heavy topics like child abuse, spousal abuse, and drug dealing. We're not endorsing these, they just happen to come up in the course of discussing a Kickstarter scam. So if you have trouble with those topics, you might not want to watch this episode. Also, if you're worried about spoilers for the current season of Game of Thrones, you also might want to skip this episode because the scam Kickstarter is based around Game of Thrones. With that, let's cut to the interview. Hi, I'm Garnbreak1 with Midgardia RPG's cool crowdfunding show, and I'm here today with Superbacker. How's it going?
Hey, it's going well. How are you?
I'm pretty good. So you're here today to talk about, well, you do have a Kickstarter project, but it's not really about that. It's the Stop Danny P the board game. Why don't you tell me a little bit
Yeah.
about the... Sorry.
So there's been, some recent, you can call it drama happening online regarding crowdfunding and the notion of scams on crowdfunding. And, that kind of developed in and of itself into civility and parody and, all kinds of different things that I'm really happy to talk about with you today.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't follow most of this. I saw some of it. I think the worst parts of it happened while I was asleep, unfortunately. So I'm pretty interested in hearing just how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Sure. And, let me preface this to all of your listeners that, I can only talk about this from my perspective as I saw it happen. I'm one of many who kind of witnessed this train wreck that we're about to dive into happen. And, my word is by no means gospel. I can only talk about what I saw and my participation in what I saw. Just, to clarify that, I have the story as I see it. I am by no means, I don't have the full picture. I don't think anybody really does about this individual. But it's a serious situation and it's a serious topic that I think needs to be addressed.
Yep, and this is definitely more of an oral history than it is the final like archaeological record of what all went down.
Right, right. So let's get into it.
Yeah. Why don't you tell me about well, start at the beginning as far as we know.
Okay. So where I kind of got involved in this whole situation is, I'm part of many Facebook groups about games, as I think many gamers are. And one of the things that popped up on my feed was a Kickstarter about a Game of Thrones board game. And I'm a huge fan of the TV series. I've started to get into the book series. So I was curious, to say the least, about this project. I've done enough research and know enough people to know that Fantasy Flight has owned the license to the Game of Thrones card games for years now. So I clicked on the Kickstarter, and it was a really confusing mess, to say the least. So this Kickstarter page, uh, it was a company or a person by the name of CCS was the creator, and you start scrolling through this, and they have this wild claim that they've talked to Jeff Peters, who is the head of licensing at HBO, and they have this game, if you can call it a game, laid out where you have these attack cards and you have these defend cards. And the creator is kind of claiming that this is a revolutionary new game mechanic, which we hear all the time on Kickstarter. But it sounded so simple and so basic, and I was thinking, would HBO actually license its property off to a no-name game designer with not much of a prototype to show for it? So, the concept of the game is you have cards with a set number of points, and you use your attack cards to attack, and you use your defend cards to defend. I mean, as far as mechanics are concerned, there weren't many there to begin with. So, I'm following this, and then I look at the rewards that this person is offering. Um, if you pledge for his campaign, you'll get a copy of the game. And if you pledge for his campaign with a couple $100, you'll get a signed replica of the dagger that killed, the Night King. And if you pledge for, a couple more $100, you will get, as he put it, a script of the episode The Long Night, signed by all of the cast. But not all of the cast, just 3 cast members is what he sold it as. And if you sign or pledge for a couple more $100, you'll get a copy signed by George R. R. Martin. I mean, these are ridiculous promises that nobody could possibly fulfill on, especially at this point in the production history of the show. The show is done filming. These people, although they've been doing, the PR rounds for weeks now about the show, there's no way that you're going to get all these people together in one place to get them to sign. Nor would they. They wouldn't have any licensing within their contract to sign merchandise for fans. I'm based in Houston, and Amelia Clark was just here for our big Comic Palooza. And in order to get her signature, which sold out months ago, it was $300 for one. So imagine how much it would cost someone, even if they were just a fan going to get these signed, to have all of these copies of his game signed by the entire cast of the show. It's ridiculous. It's impossible. And his funding goal was set for $15,000, which is not even enough to, get the game made for. And so in order to comment on this game, you had to pledge at least $1. And I noticed there was already, a couple hundred pledges on this. And as it turned out, they had the same thoughts I did. So people pledged to back the game and, essentially troll this person in the comments section. Yeah, so that's kind of where it started. I backed the game so I could follow along, and man, it was a wild ride.
Yeah, I remember looking at it, and it's got that lovely diamond pattern on all of the back of the cards, like
For
diamond
me, that is
plates.
now
Yeah.
it's a classic image. I
Oh,
mean,
it's
after all we've gone through, like that is kind of the defining image of this Kickstarter. It was essentially the Fire Fest of board games.
a little bit, yeah. It's disgusting. It looks terrible.
Yeah, but it's something about it is just so beautiful as well. Thinking that you can look at this diamond plated clip art, that's all it is. It's diamond clip art, and think HBO would approve of this. You know, to even have the name recognition out there with this. I mean, it's just such a fail on so many levels.
Like you've almost got to respect the absolute testicular fortitude in putting out like this and being like, yeah, this is legit. Give me money.
Exactly. Which is why I think the conversation, in the comment section was so interesting, because this person had to be delusional. One of my favorite things that I mean, it's not good in the sense of it was just entertaining. But one of the people in the comments section early on was trying to kind of comprehend the rules of the situation. And are you a Game of Thrones fan
Uh,
yourself? Do you
I'm
watch the show at all?
I'm not. No, I watched the first episode around when it came out, and that was about it.
Uh, okay, so do you care if I spoil this? You might want to put a spoiler warning
Oh yeah, I'll put a
for
spoiler warning at the
your.
beginning of the video.
Okay,
Yeah.
so one of the comments somebody wrote said, if you have the Night King card and you choose to use it as a defense card, it won't fare so well, especially if your opponent has an Arya card in his or her defense. Your defense can be toppled in seconds. That's one of the examples given on the game. The comment was, why would having an Arya card be good against the Night King? So in the show, they've been building up the Night King as one of the big bads of the entire series. And this season, the character Arya surprisingly kills him in the 3rd episode. And the comments that follow under that, somebody said, oh no, I feel so bad for you that this is what spoiled it for you. I hurt for you to having to find out like this. You know, the creator gave away one of the biggest moments of the entire series, and somebody found out by looking at this cheap knockoff scam.
Where he had also misspelled the Night King.
He had misspelled the Night King. I mean, he didn't know the difference between your and your, which I guess is not easy to decipher via audio, but Y-O-U-R and Y-O-U apostrophe R-E. He didn't know the difference in the forms of there. Um, so circling back, everything just kind of, reeked of a scam. Um, and the entire time, he was first of all, he was issuing threats. He was issuing threats on the main campaign page, and he was telling people on the main campaign, don't read the comments. I mean, who does that? And in the comment section, he was threatening, he said that this is, your comments are verging on harassment, which violates Kickstarter terms. I'm going to have them reported, which he did. And he actually had several comments taken down regarding, people questioning the quality of the game. There was a couple people that reached out to HBO, and HBO said, no, we don't know anything about this. And the guy continued to state that he's contacted HBO and they've given him approval. Some people reached out to FFG, who holds the license to the card game, and they tweeted out a picture of the character from the show with fire all around her, saying that they'll take care of this. But Kickstarter did nothing, right? I can't even begin to fathom the amount of people that reported this project. And Kickstarter wasn't doing anything to have it taken down or have it stopped. And so one of the people in the comment section, persuaded the creator, who by this time has been, outed as a man named Daniel Perez. They persuaded Daniel. They said, why don't you create a YouTube Q&A so that we can talk to you about the game, we can see your prototype, quote unquote, in action. And he agreed. He posted a link to his YouTube channel, and when you clicked on it, you were brought to a countdown timer on one of the YouTube pages for his Q&A. And so you go from there, right? So if you have this person's personal information, you know who this person is at this point. You kind of do everything to research this person. So, he owns a business. It's kind of like a resale or pawn shop in what appears to be a small town. He just seems kind of like just a clueless goof. Like doesn't maybe intentionally mean to come across as a scammer, even though that's completely what he's doing. Maybe he's just being completely ignorant. And I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt over this. And then you click on his YouTube channel and you look at his videos that he's gotten. He has a couple videos, and they're recorded live streams that he did playing, Apex Legends or Sekiro. And these live streams are several hours long. So let's talk about the first one, which is the most infamous one. It is an 8-hour live stream for him playing Apex Legends. And you click on it, and I am not the person that discovered this. I saw it linked in the comment section. So I clicked on it, and it's 8 hours of him playing Apex Legends, which doesn't sound very interesting until you get to the 7-hour and 53-minute mark. And at that point, you hear physical abuse, or what appears to be physical abuse, towards a small child. I had to shut the video off when I first started hearing that. It wasn't just a spanking. You hear him scream at this child the words "eat it" over again, over and over again. So I can only kind of decipher what had happened. I was thinking in my head, potentially a small child came in, spilled something, and he was telling the child to eat it. whether he was telling him to eat it off the ground, whether he put it back in a bowl and told the child to eat it. That doesn't matter. You know, he was screaming at a child to eat it. And then you hear very clearly thumping sounds, which sound like physical skin to skin contact, really hard. And again, you know, there's no video of this. The screen is just showing a disconnect from the video game and trying to piece everything together. And then you hear him tell the child that he's going to throw him out the fucking window. Quote. And I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit there and kind of let this slide. I know nothing about the state of Connecticut, but I did, you know, a quick Google search, and I found their essentially equivalent of Child Protective Services, which is the Department of Children and Families. And I called them, and and I tried to explain to the woman on the phone what a Kickstarter was. I had to start at the beginning and tell the whole story. She didn't know what a Kickstarter was, and it took about 5 minutes to get past that point. And then she asked to hear the video, and so I had to hear the whole thing once again. And by the end of the video, she said that there wasn't really anything that they could do for me because I didn't have this person's home address. We just, through our collective research, we had their business address, and that was it. But they did refer me to the Milford, Connecticut Police Department. So I called them and spoke with Jill. And after 5 minutes of trying to explain what a Kickstarter was, he put me on hold. And when he came back, he said, you know, I was on hold for maybe 2 minutes. And when he came back, he said that there was an influx of about 15 or 20 calls within that short amount of time regarding the exact same situation. So what started off as a scam or a joke quickly became incredibly serious and incredibly disturbing. Not only to listen to, you know, and I'm not trying to by any means make this about me. I don't think any person or gamer would, but, you know, even just as a sideline viewer of the situation, you know, it can take an emotional toll on someone to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been laughing a little bit here. It's more the absurdity of the situation than, like, you know, obviously child abuse isn't funny, but
Right.
there's just something about the sheer absurdity of, like, you're playing Apex Legends live on YouTube and then you take a break to go beat your kid and then you leave that up on YouTube. It's just like, what? And then you link thousands of people to your YouTube channel for the most
Right.
recent video. Like, what?
It's absolute insanity. And, you know, and so that was the most notorious video, right? So later on in that video, I guess he gets a phone call from a woman that, you know, don't know who she is. He doesn't identify her. You know, it could be his ex-wife or wife, or you don't know. But he sounds incredibly, you know, intoxicated or on something. Something has happened from his voice, you know, at the beginning of the video to now. And, you know, she's accusing him of calling her a prostitute and sleeping with other men. And he's like, I didn't call you any fucking names. And I mean, they just go on in this kind of abusive rant towards each other for a couple minutes. So that was video number one. Another video that surfaced, he is speaking to a woman over the phone. And I mean, the person's on speakerphone. You can hear the entire conversation, both parties. But he's speaking to a woman about buying ads, which is short for Adderall. And he's talking about, you know, not having any Xanax to trade. And, you know, he keeps telling the woman that his kids are asleep right next to him. By the way, this is also in a live stream of a game. You know, it's like to have just the complete stupidity to do this, to record this, to post this. I mean, there are several steps that have to happen in order to post a video to YouTube. You know,
It,
two or three.
I mean, if you record it on, like, if you stream to YouTube, it automatically posts it, so maybe only two, but
But
still,
still,
hot damn.
you're still aware that you are posting, right? That,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna guess to say that he is maybe a amateur streamer, possibly wanting to have people, gain interest in him watching play Apex Legends for 8 hours. I don't know,
I mean,
I've streamed a couple of video games before, and I think at max I've had maybe 15 or 20 people. But it sounds like he's trying to find a way to gain, some notoriety or fame in that regard. Um,
maybe
yeah,
maybe beating your kids and buying drugs on stream isn't the way to do it, you know?
it certainly isn't the way to gain the attention I think that he was wanting, but he definitely did get attention out of it. And I'm glad, right? Part of me was thinking while this whole thing, before these videos surfaced and while the campaign was actively running, part of me was thinking, why is this not being dealt with? Why is this not being taken care of? And I don't know, what everyone believes in, but part of me always likes to think that things happen for a reason or things happen as they're supposed to happen. Had that Kickstarter been shut down early enough, these videos wouldn't have surfaced, right? We nobody would have known about this. We would have just thought he was an asshole trying to scam people. Now we know he's an idiot asshole trying to scam people that also beats his kids, and verbally assaults women, and buys drugs over the phone with his kids asleep right next to him. None of this would have come out had the Kickstarter been shut down. So I'm grateful that it went on, longer than it should have, for these things to come to light. But that brings up another issue, a whole other issue, which we can talk about later. Is Kickstarter doesn't really have any accountability with things like this. You know, they'll let projects that are clearly scams get posted, and it appears like they just, as long as they get their money, they're happy.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, Kickstarter is a very buyer beware kind of place, for good or for
uh,
ill.
absolutely, absolutely. But back to the guy. You know, so back to the story. Um, this gets reported by multiple people, myself included, to the Milford, Connecticut Police Department, Department of Families and Children, and the Kickstarter gets shut down. We're all very happy for this. Kickstarter gets shut down, and I think it was not even a full 24 hours later, Daniel starts up an Indiegogo for the. Oh wait, let me back up. Okay, so people have reported on the comments, about this, that he's beat his children and whatnot. Um, and so he goes and he changes the name of the the user, the Kickstarter user. He changes the name of the creator of the game. It's now a woman named Alessandra. He changes everything on the main campaign, saying, he's essentially, I think, trying to cover his tracks, saying that, this is Alessandra's game. She created it. It's all her idea. I'm just here to help her get her idea out, kind of thing,
Right.
which is completely different than the story that was on there earlier. Um, and so the game gets shut down, and not even 24 hours later, a new one pops up on Indiegogo.
I do want to stop you for a sec.
Sure.
It wasn't shut down by Kickstarter. When I went to view the page again, after all that, it said
Mhm.
suspended by creator.
Well, so yes, it said that for a while, and then when I looked at it, it said it was suspended by Kickstarter, and it then was later taken down at the owner's request. Because I'm a backer on it, I still can look at it. I can still look at the page, and so there's, I think, some general confusion in that area. Um, because I'm looking at the page right now, and it said funding was suspended. Funding for this project was suspended by Kickstarter 5 days ago.
Oh, yeah, and for the public view, if you're not a backer, it just says it's been removed from visibility at the request of the creator and will remain permanently out of view.
Right, and so at the time that this was suspended, it had 272 backers with $5,099. Um, all these people obviously were doing it just to either follow along with the show and kind of see where it goes. I don't think, I really sincerely hope nobody backed this game hoping that it was real. I mean, you could take that money and go buy the FFG game. Um, I think every single person that backed this game really needed to see where this went. Um, so yeah, Kickstarter suspended the game, and then he took it down. And I'm really grateful that I backed it because I still have access to the entire thing as it stood when it was suspended. It went through multiple iterations, but kind of looking through it, he when people discovered who he was, then he started posting pictures of his physical brick and mortar store, his pawn shop, to show people that he ran a legit business. Um, he posted more cards with more clip art and more screen caps from the show, which at this point in the story, he says that the game is no longer based on the Game of Thrones show. It's based on the Song of Ice and Fire book series by George R. R. Martin. But he still uses images from the show, still claims, to have autographs of cast members from the show.
Right.
Uh,
One of his very distinctive phrases was, "It's not a direct representation of the show."
right. When he was using a direct representation of the show.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, and so you can kind of see on here, it's like he can no longer keep his story straight. At one point, he references the game no longer as the Game of Thrones card game. He references it as Race to the Throne, the card game, which is what his later campaigns are called. And it's like so it's like he realizes he's been caught. And so, he's trying to change the IP enough that it's no longer considered copyright infringement. And so you can see kind of like the wheels turning in the campaign, because he starts referencing the game by a different name, um, trying to change up the mechanics and the rules. So, it's, God, just even talking about it's a headache, you know,
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
anybody that followed the story. It's really one of those like Reddit black holes that once you start looking at, you just kind of fall down into.
Truly the Cicada 3301 of Kickstarter, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
So,
where do we go from here? What do you want to talk about?
I think that is there anything really worth talking about in the second Kickstarter, or was it just more of the same?
Well, so the thing to note is that the way that Indiegogo was set up was that no matter so with Kickstarter, for anybody that doesn't know, if the campaign doesn't reach its funding goal, then he doesn't get any of the money. With the Indiegogo, it was a flexible goal. So any money that was pledged to him would be given to him at the end of the campaign. And so it was really important to quickly get the word out on that. That if people donated to this person, if they pledged money for this game, that's his money. Um, and so you compare the two um, crowdfunding sites where, like I said, he's got about $5,000 on his Kickstarter. I think he ended his Indiegogo with like $7 or $8, and those were people that were just pledging to comment on the project. So that was his second crowdfunder. And that goes on for a couple days. So here is where things get really weird. Here, this point,
Really?
not everything before. Here's where things get really weird. So I wake up. I guess it's Friday morning. It was either late Thursday night or Friday morning that I saw. He and his kids went missing. Are you aware of this?
No.
Yeah, he
This
and
is
his kids
all
went missing. So he and his wife and his kids, I'm guessing, again, I don't have the full story as far as what happened, but from what the news reported, Milford police went to investigate, and the Connecticut Department of Children and Families went as well. And so he was expecting a visit from the Department of Children and Families, and they went, and he and his family were gone. Um, he left with his wife and his two toddlers, the boys in question in the video. The department went to go and investigate, and yeah, the family was gone. Um, they found them, thankfully, thank God, a little bit later that day in Rhode Island. Um, Apparently, Daniel or his wife had relatives there, and so they went to the relatives to avoid this meeting. Um, from what I've read and kind of followed up on, um, essentially the Department of Children and Families said that there was no signs of abuse. Bruises can heal. You know, they did say that they were concerned about the living conditions at the home, and so one of the last updates that I saw was that the kids were taken into a foster family. Um, but I know enough about the programs like that. The goal is to always reunite or reconnect families. Um, and so if the concern was the living conditions, the appropriateness of the living conditions of the house, essentially all these parents have to do is get the house in a functioning order, and then they'll have their kids returned to them. Which is a serious concern, if the physical abuse is happening. Granted, they're going to have, more eyes on them and a lot more scrutiny. Um, I'm not a caseworker, but in my opinion, these people shouldn't have kids. They shouldn't be anywhere near kids until they seek help that they need.
Yeah, nothing says completely legit like fleeing the state when you
Yeah,
yeah, when you're supposed to have a meeting with family services.
right,
I'm not
right.
sure how far Connecticut is from Rhode Island. I'm Canadian. My grasp on U.S. geography is
Mm.
I know where
It's, I
Kansas
mean,
is. Yeah.
it's not very far.
Okay, so
I
it's like
mean, the New England states are relatively small. It's about a 4 hour drive. I'm in Texas. It takes
yeah,
about 13 hours just to get out of Texas. Um, but it's across state lines.
right. And
It's far enough.
4 hours is not a day trip. This was not an accident. Like
Right. Right. And you have to have a cognizant awareness. Well, if you are mentally stable, you have a cognizant awareness of, putting the family in the car, getting in the car, leaving, your neighborhood, driving across the state, driving into another state, right? You have these thoughts of, fight or flight, of, face the truth, right? I can't even imagine what was going on in his head as he was driving his family trying to flee or escape the situation.
yeah, that's some shit.
It
Um,
is. Absolutely.
so and this was after the second, like after the last of the crowdfunding campaigns, or
Oh no. Because while the kids were gone, he started a second Kickstarter.
what? Wait,
Yep.
so he's I saw the second Kickstarter. He put that up while he was like on the run from child services.
Well, I mean, all I can do is compare the news reports to when the Kickstarter was posted. And the news reports reported the kids missing. This Kickstarter comes up, and then they report that they found the family. So this happened. This was posted while he was gone with the children.
What the fuck?
And, of course, it's posted under a completely different name, um, a completely different like format. It no longer has these really horrible clip art images, these diamond plate clip art. It now uses what appears to be hand drawn sketches. And any quick Google reverse image search will show you that he just stole this off Wikipedia, even though he's claiming that it's original artwork. No, it's not. And yeah, so this all happened while he was gone with the kids. It sounds like his main concern was trying to make money.
Well,
So yeah,
yeah.
and that kind of is where the story has kind of hit a standstill. Um, not much has come out after that. Um, so yeah, I guess that's where our tale of Daniel Perez ends.
Well, that's some shit. Yeah, and
Yep.
the second Kickstarter had like a bunch of really incoherent mechanics and stuff too.
Hmm.
Um, that's weird, man.
Yeah.
I didn't expect fleeing from the law to be part of this story. Uh,
Which is which is where things got really serious. I mean, of course, the allegations of child abuse and the drug abuse and the verbal abuse towards women, those are all very serious. But now you're dealing with somebody who's on the run from the law, probably desperate, not in the best mental state, and he's got kids with him.
yeah,
You know, um, so yeah, there was definitely some serious concerns for the children. Um, and I think at this point, everybody who backed the Kickstarter was so emotionally invested in this story, that they really needed to have a sense of closure. We know that the kids are in foster care. We don't know what's going to come of it after that, but the story is still kind of ongoing.
yeah. And one of the unfortunate things about reality is there's not closure a lot of the times. Things just kind of drift.
Right, right. Maybe in a couple months, somebody will just out of curiosity search them up and see if anything's happened or developed. But it kind of ended abruptly. I mean, in a good way. He no longer had the kids, but we were kind of cut short. Um, so Friday rolls around, and I'm having a conversation with somebody, just about this whole situation, and I didn't have to work that day. So during this conversation, I had this idea to make my own Kickstarter. So I created a game. I mean, you can use that term loosely, game, called Stop Danny P, the board game. And yeah, that's kind of where things are at with me right now.
I love the Trickstarter logo, by the way, and Indie No No.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it just kind of, the story writes itself. Like the game writes itself. Um, and of course, I have to preface saying that the game is not based on any individuals, living or dead. Any relationship is purely coincidental. Um, but yeah, the game is a roll and move game. As basic as you can get, and you collectively as a group of players are trying to stop someone from creating a scam Kickstarter game, or sorry, Trickstarter. So there's Trickstarter and there's Indie No No, and you roll the dice, you move along the board, and if you land on a Trickstarter space, you have to flip a card over, which has a pledge amount. If you land on an Indie No No space, you have to flip that card over, and you are trying to get the crowdfunding sites shut down while trying to make sure the kids are safe. Again, any relationship to any persons or events, living or dead, is purely coincidental. Um, so yeah, the idea for this game came about just kind of talking about the situation and what's happened. Um, Print and play. I think it's you pledge $10, and you get some print and play files if it funds. Um, but yeah, that's kind of all I could do to process. I am a big believer that you've got to be able to find humor in things, even the most darkest situations. Um, and so I created this game, purely based on satire, parody, whatever you want to call it. Um, yeah, so that's kind of what I've got up and running right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see at $50 you can get a calculator, not patent pending.
Yes. Yeah. So, you can get a calculator. This one is not patent pending. And if you pledge $100, then you can get a piece of paper that says this is a certificate. If you pledge, I think $250, I'll get a toy dagger and sign it and send it to you. Um, you know, because again, now these are promises that I can absolutely fulfill on. But you look on the absurdity of pledge tiers and reward levels and things that you get, or things that you're trying to persuade consumers to buy, right? With their hard-earned money. And some people are not fortunate enough to where they can back, several of these $100, $200 Kickstarters every year. They get one or two. And so trying to take advantage of people through these promises on pledge levels is absurd. Which is where the idea for my reward tiers came from. And people have commented on mine, oh, you should do this, and I'll give the people what they want. So I think right now I've got one person that wants a piece of paper that says this is a certificate.
That's
Cool,
incredible. Yeah.
cool.
So so let's talk a little bit more broadly about Kickstarters and like what kind of stuff to look out for, and Indiegogo as well, and whatever crowdfunding sites are out there.
Sure.
What do you look for when determining the legitimacy of a project?
The first thing I look at, well, as you scroll through there, the first thing I look at is it something I'm interested in? How is it presenting itself? Does it look like something that somebody has spent a lot of time developing, just from a graphical, like visual perspective? When I click on their Kickstarter page, does it look like they've spent time in the graphic design and the presentation? Did they create a video? Is there a rule book? That's the very first thing I look at, to determine kind of A, if I'm interested, and B, the legitimacy of the project. The next thing I look for is the creator, right? Is there a name that I recognize attached to this project, whether it's a company name or a designer? Um, if it's based off of an existing IP, do I look for the licensor? The is the name of the licensor on every single piece of marketing material, because it should be. Um, so there are several things that you can look for. But even with all of that, some of these projects still fall through. So it's a gamble. It's absolutely a risk. And the way that crowdfunding is set up is that, the crowdfunding site takes no responsibility for it, which I can understand. But there's no vetting that happens. For the game that I created, it had all these things on the creation page of, it's gonna be under a review process, and if it is um, approved, then you're gonna be able to, submit it and it'll be launched. Mine didn't go through that, and I don't know if it's the amount of money that I had set the campaign for, um, or the fact that it's, I'm a no name nobody. Um, there was absolutely no vetting done. Um, from the time it said submit for review, it immediately took me to a submit to launch page.
Hmm.
And I've read blogs of other creators of big game designers who said that their project took 2 to 3 days before it was able to be launched. It went through a review process, and some that were in a situation like me where they submitted it to review and then it let them launch it immediately.
Yeah, I'd wager
So
it's something to do with funding levels, probably.
I think it is. If you're asking for tens of thousands of dollars, which a lot of these games take, especially like a miniatures game takes to develop, I'm sure it goes under a review process. Um, but that doesn't stop people from trying to scam the community.
Yeah.
Um, so I backed projects. I backed projects. I think one of the most famous ones, or for me, was the Evil Dead 2, the board game. Um, a company that acquired the license. The graphic design was it was mediocre. But I'm a big Evil Dead fan, and so something just for the sake of having, I backed. And allegedly, this company took all of its funds that it received from the Evil Dead game and took those funds and used part of them to purchase the IP for Terminator, to make a Terminator game, which they also put on Kickstarter. And so they're then gambling with other people's money, right? They're not taking that money and fulfilling on the product that they already had announced and already had funded. So that project completely scrapped.
Right, and that's unfortunately common. There's been a couple of cases of that. The Homestuck video
Right.
game, one of Double Fine's was met with had that happen to it as well. And it's just
hmm the Super Dungeon Explorer Legends was a big one. I don't know what happened with the company. I don't know all the story about that, but I do know it's something that people have been waiting years to get, and it looks like it's never going to happen.
yeah. And some of these, it's a case of simple misfortune. Things went awry in production, or like whatever. But
Which is totally understandable. But if it's a company that's got any legitimacy, then they let the backers know completely,
yeah,
right? They're completely straightforward. And I mean, yes, of course, they're trying to avoid any potential lawsuits, but they're very transparent. Now, you look at something on the flip side, and I don't know all the details of this, and so I'm sure some of you viewers can help kind of fill in the holes. But there was a game launched a couple of years ago called Load, and it looked very promising. It had these incredibly detailed miniatures, but there was no. It was a brand new company, no information on the designer, really no information on the company. And through internet sleuthing, they found out the company had developed an Alien vs Predator, I believe, game that um, was really difficult to fulfill that project. And so a lot of people backed out, took their funding away. And the game, I think the Load game, it reached its funding. It not only met its release date, projected release date, I think it actually arrived early, which is unusual for miniatures games. Usually those are kind of stuck in the cooker for, well past their expected release date. So, you have these projects that are welcome surprises that, you know, first time developer or it's a new company that is trying to restore some good faith in their product. And they do, so that's why it's tricky to kind of navigate how you're going to portion your funds with whatever games you're interested in backing.
yeah, absolutely. My general ethos is, once I put money on a Kickstarter, assume I'm never going to see anything from it, and if I do, hooray! Um,
Right. Right. And one of the things I've been doing lately is just going in at like the lowest pledge amount possible, just to kind of, if I lose a dollar, I lose a dollar. I would rather that than go all in, and so that way I go in with the lowest amount possible, and I really have enough time to kind of research the company, look at reviews, read through the rule book, and if I'm able to add items in the pledge manager, if I decide that I want to go all in on this game, then I will. Um, but it allows me that opportunity to really be an informed consumer.
right. And I think one of the big points that we kind of keep coming back to is be transparent. If your
Right.
project is experiencing difficulties, make an update. Be like, hey, it's delayed for this reason. Like, people are gonna understand. If you disappear for a year without saying anything, things aren't gonna go so well for you. You know?
Right. Right. Um, and you have these super successful board game companies that produce, that are almost actually abusing the system. Companies that are established companies that don't need crowdfunding as a way to develop their game, but they turn to crowdfunding with promises of, all these exclusive miniatures or limited editions, or, it's going to be a low print game. These are well established companies that don't need crowdfunding as a resource. And I think it's kind of morphed from, getting people their shot, to develop a game and have it sell and go into production and all these things, into people are looking for these six-figure, Kickstarters, that they not only surpass their anticipated project goal, they go well into the 6, 7 figures. Any game that's making upwards of $1 million on Kickstarter, you don't need to make a second Kickstarter. You've got enough funding now that you can create a company in legitimacy. And I really think that's hurting the market for game design. I do.
Yeah, so you're definitely in the anti like corporate Kickstarter kind of camp.
Not initially, because that was one of the things that I looked for. Was it a company a name that I recognized? But now I'm starting to go into the other camp. Um, it's there's a lot of projects out there that are great projects that aren't going to see the light of day because it's not this big name with this IP attached to it going through the Kickstarter channel.
Right.
Because people, I'm part of a game developers group on Facebook for Kickstarter, and people on there spend years developing their IPs that don't reach funding.
Meanwhile, like the Bloodborne board game makes unfathomable amounts of dollars, and no ill will towards them, but is that
Right.
really something you needed Kickstarter for? At like you made $3 million already.
Exactly. Exactly. And I understand if it's a big company taking a riskier project, something that it doesn't have an IP attached to it, they don't know how it's going to do, but they're using Kickstarter as a way to gauge the community's interest. That I understand, But in your instance, your reference, Bloodborne is a huge IP. It's a video game on PlayStation. It's got a massive following. The company you're referencing already has one Bloodborne game out with an expansion, and they've created a miniatures game on it. They don't need Kickstarter as a means to gain money for this.
Yeah, and I'm looking through it right now, and everything is limited print run, Kickstarter exclusive, limited print run, Kickstarter exclusive. Like,
Right, right,
and it's just it feels almost like it's preying on the fear of missing out kind of effect, right?
right, absolutely. Because then you go into the resale market, right? You have people that back and get multiple copies of this game, and then they sell it on their own on eBay for a couple $100s, or at least they try to. So it then floods the market completely. Um, and there's been a couple Kickstarters that were not big game companies that I missed out on. And there was no chance of this game ever getting printed again. And so if you try to find a copy of it on eBay, if one gets posted, it's going to be a markup of 200-300%.
Yeah, which is not really the ideal, and maybe saying it's abusing Kickstarter is going a little bit too far, but it certainly doesn't feel ethical, I guess.
Right, right. And so some of these things, I think the way it's worded in Kickstarter is that if you make something Kickstarter exclusive, you cannot sell it. Like if you're the developer, you can't sell it outside of Kickstarter. So what they'll do is they'll take that item and then repackage it and say it's a convention exclusive. So then you have to go to the conventions to get an opportunity to get this item, and you can't outright buy it, right? You have to spend X amount of dollars in their convention store to gain enough points to get the item you missed out on in the Kickstarter.
Oof, that's
Um,
yeah.
yeah, it's a workaround of the system. I mean, they're not violating anything. They're not breaking any laws. It's their product. They can do with it what they want. Um, but yeah, I think you get into a real big question of ethics when you start looking at this. So
Yeah. Well, hell, that was a whole lot.
yeah,
Is there
yeah, it
anything
was.
else you want to cover while we're here?
Um, Trying to think. Um, no, not really. I think we've covered basically everything. Um, yeah, I mean, if people are interested in backing Stop Danny P, the board game, they absolutely can. I think there's still about 25 days of it on Kickstarter. You can pledge $100 for a piece of paper if you'd like, um, or you can pledge $10 for a print and play. Now, there's no money raised on Kickstarter can go towards charity. I think I legally have to say that. But if funds did happen to go towards, organizations that helped children, families in need, I think that would be a great thing.
Yeah.
So, uh, I don't expect the project to fund. That was clear to me from the beginning. I never went into it with the anticipation that this project was going to fund, that I was going to make any money. That was never the goal or the plan. Um, and what's recently developed out of the Kickstarter I created was this conversation about appropriateness, bullying. Um, Somebody called me out on bullying. They said I was bullying the creator, and so I thought about it for a couple days. And you've got to be able to draw a line somewhere, because it was posted entirely as satire. And everybody's got their own barometer as to what they find humorous, and each individual has to decide that for themselves. For me, I love biting satire. Where you're able to look at someone's stupidity and be able to laugh at it, and so that's why I created the game.
Right.
Not only that, but to give some people some closure. But then you get into the question of, well, are you bullying someone with a mental illness, which has been posed to me? I'm not a doctor. I can't diagnose this person. I can connect the dots based on what I had to listen to multiple times when I filed my police report. Um, but I don't know what happens in that household. Um, I think for me, I have to put civility on hold when I'm dealing with someone who has there's abuse, alleged abuse happening, alleged drug addiction happening. I have to put that on hold, which is why the game came out or came out on Kickstarter.
Right. And I never would have found out about the rest of this if it wasn't for that. And
Right.
I feel like
Yeah,
that's
and
gonna be, yeah, the same
that's
case.
the other portion is bringing awareness. Sorry to cut you off,
No, it's
but
all good,
bringing
man.
awareness to Kickstarter scams. Um, it's one of those things. You'll either love it, you'll see the humor in it, you'll see the satire and the parody, or you'll hate it. And either one is okay, as long as we have a dialogue about it, right? As long as we can have a conversation where we're not name calling and we're not threatening to report or suspend, where we can have an honest conversation and really look at our values.
Right. And there is certainly a discussion to be had about, when does it stop being a joke and starts being bullying, especially with the events over on YouTube in the last like week or so with various
Mm-hmm.
streamers.
Sure,
Uh,
sure. So yeah, that's something that every viewer is going to have to kind of decide for themselves. Um, so I hope it opens up the conversation. I hope, you know, from creating this and going through this whole experience, a lot of people that have like backed my project in earnestness, like not as a joke, doing it out of support. They're kind of pledged to serve as, kind of watchdogs to try and hold Kickstarter accountable or creators on Kickstarter accountable for their product. Um, they've said that in the comment section, somebody had said that, it's a place for them to kind of get together and keep an eye out on things. Um, so yeah, bringing awareness to the community is definitely something that I think we all have to do, and we all have to kind of educate ourselves uh, as to what may potentially be a scam. What is abuse, what is bullying, So hopefully I answered some of your questions. Um, I know this is different than the other videos you've posted, but I'm glad that again I'm glad the dialogue is happening.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a bit of my normal wheelhouse, but definitely worth talking about. And
Mhm.
if I'm talking about crowdfunding, it's worth talking about the unseemly stuff that occasionally happens, and
Right.
associated things with it.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. Crowdfunding is great. The community that develops through crowdfunding is really fun to be a part of. There's some board games that I've backed that the game's not coming out for several more months, but the community is so active in their Facebook groups and in the comments section. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to be a part of. But there is a dark side to crowdfunding that doesn't really get talked about very much.
Yeah. Well, it's been great talking to you, Superbacker.
Yeah,
That
you too.
that was a pretty extensive rundown.
It, wa-
Yeah, that's some shit, dude. I don't know what else
it
to say
is.
about it.
I mean, there really isn't anything else you can say. Just be mindful and be vigilant.
Yeah. Well, for all of our viewers at home, have a good night.
Yeah, thanks. You too.
And the recording's done. That was